My wife secretly sold our family home for $450, $0 behind my back, then lied about it, and now she's claiming I owe her half the proceeds, except she never even contributed to the mortgage or renovations. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video, using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, but I didn't want to face it. My wife was always a little bitchy when she didn't get her way, but lately she'd been downright cold. Little things, you know. She'd come home late, avoid eye contact, and snap at me over nothing. I figured it was just stress, work, life, whatever. But then I started noticing the small signs that she was hiding something. One night, I was cleaning out the closet and found a receipt tucked behind some shirts. It was for a furniture store, and the date was just a week before she suddenly had to go out of town for a conference. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I looked closer. The receipt was for a new sofa, something we never discussed or could afford right now. That was odd, considering we were tight on money lately, and I hadn't seen her buy anything expensive. The next day, I noticed her acting strange when she thought I wasn't looking. She was sneaking around her phone, deleting messages, and her stories seemed rehearsed. I decided to check her social media, something I'd never really done before. That's when I saw it. There were dozens of messages, flirty and blatantly inappropriate, exchanged with some guy named Jake. They'd been talking for months, apparently, and I had no idea. The worst part, she was lying about everything, acting like she was busy with work or with her friends, but the truth was she'd been sneaking around behind my back. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I'd loved and trusted, was cheating on me with some guy she met at a bar, and she had the nerve to lie about it. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. All at once. How could she do this? How could she lie about something so big? I remember sitting there, staring at her phone, feeling like my world was crashing down around me. I didn't sleep that night, replaying everything in my head, her sneaky behavior, the secret trips, the lies. It was like I'd been hit by a truck. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I confronted her in the kitchen, my voice shaking but firm. I asked her about the messages, about Jake, about everything. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was in control. "Oh, that. It's nothing, just some guy from work. You're overreacting," she said, brushing it off like it was no big deal. But I knew better. I'd seen enough to know that this wasn't just some innocent flirtation, it was something serious. I told her I'd found her messages, and she just rolled her eyes, acting like I was crazy. She started in with her usual bullshit, blaming me for her behavior, saying I was paranoid, that I didn't pay enough attention to her, that she deserved to have some fun. She claimed Jake was just a friend, that I was being insecure, that I was overreacting because I was jealous, but I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze, and I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't just about her cheating, it was about the betrayal of everything we'd built together. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, and I knew this was only the beginning. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at her the same way. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was suddenly just a stranger wearing her face. She kept insisting it was nothing, that I was making a big deal out of nothing, but I wasn't stupid. I saw the way her eyes darted around, the way she refused to meet my gaze directly. She was lying, plain and simple, and I knew I had to dig deeper. I started digging through her phone when she wasn't home. I was careful, trying not to get caught, but I needed to see the full picture. That's when I discovered the worst part. Not just the messages with Jake, but a whole other layer of deception. There were texts from different women, flirtatious, suggestive. She'd been sneaking around with multiple people, not just Jake. It was a web of lies and betrayal I never saw coming. And what tore me apart the most was realizing how much she'd been lying about everything. Her supposed busy work trips, her supposed girls' nights. She'd been living a double life, and I was just the fool left to pick up the pieces. I also found out she'd been secretly selling our family home. I came home one day and noticed the for sale sign out front. I thought it was a mistake, But then she admitted it casually, like she was talking about buying groceries. When I pressed her, she said she'd taken care of everything and that I owed her half the proceeds, 225,000, because she claimed she'd contributed just as much as I had. That floored me. She never paid a mortgage, never put in any money for renovations, and yet she thought she deserved half of the sale. That was the moment I realized how much she'd been manipulating everything. Not only was she cheating, but she was also trying to take what wasn't hers. I demanded to know how she could do this behind my back, how she could lie to my face about everything. Her response: she called me paranoid, controlling, and said I was just jealous because I didn't satisfy her anymore. She told me I was lucky she even stayed with me this long, that she deserved better than a guy who couldn't keep up, who was boring. That's when I saw her true colors: bitchy, selfish, and completely indifferent to the damage she was causing. It's like she was reveling in her lies, enjoying the power she had over me. I felt sick. My trust was shattered and I was furious. How could she do this? How could she lie about the house, the money, the affair? I started to realize she'd been planning this all along, selling the house, cheating, throwing in her lies to cover her tracks. The more I uncovered, the more I felt like I was losing my mind. I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her manipulation. But deep down, I knew the truth. She had been plotting this for a while, and I had been too naive to see it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up, staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument, every little sign I'd ignored. I felt betrayed, not just by her infidelity, but by her entire attitude. How she'd lied, manipulated, and now expected me to accept her version of events. I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this chaos, not knowing what was real anymore. I knew I had to confront her again, to get to the bottom of her lies and figure out what my next move would be. I was angry, hurt, but also beginning to see things more clearly. This wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. It was about my dignity, my respect, and whether I could trust her again. The next day, I knew I had to do something drastic. I couldn't just sit around and let her keep pulling her bullshit. I decided to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I laid out everything I'd found: the messages, the sale of the house, the lies about the money. She tried to deny it at first, acting innocent, but I cut her off. I told her I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. She looked furious, like I just shattered her entire world, which in a way I guess I did. Her reaction was classic bitchy, dismissive, full of excuses. She said she needed space, that I was controlling, and that I'd ruined everything by invading her privacy. She threw a fit, saying I was paranoid and that I was making her out to be some kind of criminal. I told her she was the one who had lied, who'd cheated, and who'd secretly sold our home. She snapped back with, "You don't understand how hard I've worked to get us out of debt, and you're just a jealous husband who can't see what's best for himself." That's when I realized her entire game was about control and entitlement. She thought she could do whatever she wanted, take what she wanted, and I was just supposed to accept it. I told her I wanted her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who lied and cheated like this. She threw another tantrum, claiming I was throwing her to the curb because I was insecure, that she'd been doing everything for us, and that I owed her for all her sacrifices. I just stared at her, feeling numb. I knew I'd hit a nerve. She was used to getting her way, used to manipulating the situation. But I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I started considering my options. I knew I had to protect myself financially, especially with her trying to claim half the house sale proceeds. I called a lawyer to get advice about the legal side of things, how much she could really claim, whether she had a leg to stand on. The lawyer basically told me she had no real claim to the sale unless she could prove she'd contributed financially, which she hadn't. That was a small victory, but I knew she'd try to fight me on it. Meanwhile, I also started to investigate the house sale more thoroughly. I found out she'd been talking to a real estate agent behind my back, trying to get the house sold without telling me. When I confronted her with this, she just shrugged and said she deserved to make decisions about her own life, that I was trying to control her. She was so arrogant, so full of herself, I almost laughed, but I was furious. I realized she'd been planning to leave me for months, probably even before she sold the house. She'd been living a double life, hiding her money, cheating, and scheming behind my back. I started to gather evidence, screenshots, bank statements, everything. I knew I had to be prepared. I couldn't trust her anymore, not after all this. I decided I'd fight her for the house, for the money, for my dignity. I knew she'd spin her lies, call me crazy or paranoid, but I had to stand my ground. I refused to be the fool she thought I was. That evening, I sat down and wrote everything out, my feelings, the timeline of her lies, my plan for what to do next. I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I finally saw her for who she really was, and anger because she'd betrayed me so deeply. I realized I wasn't just fighting over money or a house. I was fighting to reclaim my life, my sanity, and my respect. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The truth was out, and I was ready to face whatever came next. That night I couldn't sleep again, but this time it was different. I was going over everything, planning my next move. I realized if I didn't act fast, she'd try to take everything, money, the house, control, and I'd be left with nothing but a broken heart and a trail of lies. I decided I needed to get ahead of her, to protect myself legally and financially. I contacted a lawyer again, told him everything, and asked what my best options were. He confirmed what I suspected. She had no claim to half the house unless she could prove she contributed financially, which she hadn't. Still, I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, so I had to be careful. I also started digging into the sale of the house more thoroughly. I found out she'd already been talking to real estate agents behind my back, trying to get it sold without telling me. That was the moment I knew she'd been planning this for a while. She was sneaky, manipulative, and completely ruthless about her self-interest. I confronted her with the evidence, and her reaction was classic defensive, bitchy, and dismissive. She said she deserved to do what she wanted, that I was trying to control her, and that she'd had enough of my paranoia. I saw the arrogance in her eyes, the way she thought she was untouchable. That was the moment I realized she'd been living a double life, lying to me from the start. I knew I had to act fast. I started to document everything: texts, emails, bank statements, even her conversations with the real estate agent. I wanted to make sure I had solid proof if she tried to spin her lies. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. This wasn't just about some affair or a house. It was about her complete betrayal of everything we'd shared. I felt like I'd been sucker punched, left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was stable. I also reached out to a financial advisor to understand what I'd be entitled to if I decided to divorce or separate. The thought of losing everything she was trying to claim made my stomach turn. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, acting innocent, calling me crazy, accusing me of trust issues. She insisted she'd done nothing wrong and that I was just jealous. I couldn't believe her audacity. She lied about everything, about the sale, her affair, her money contributions, and now she was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. I realized her entire attitude was about control. She wanted to keep the house, the money, and me under her thumb, and she was willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate to do it. I told her I was done playing her game. I told her to get out of the house, that I'd file for a legal separation if she didn't leave voluntarily. She threw a fit, crying, screaming, calling me controlling, paranoid, and insecure. But I stood my ground. I knew I had to protect myself, especially financially. I couldn't let her take everything and walk away pretending she was the victim. I knew she'd try to spin it that way, but I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. That night I sat alone in the living room, feeling exhausted but also strangely relieved. I finally saw her for what she was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd been lying to me for months. I knew there would be more battles ahead, but I was determined not to let her win. I'd faced betrayal before, but this was on another level. I had to stay strong, stay smart, and protect myself. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much it hurt, I deserved honesty, respect, and someone who actually cared about me. Not a wife who sold our home behind my back, lied about everything, and thought she could get away with it. I was done being the fool in her game. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I moved out of the bedroom, set up a temporary place to stay, and spent every free moment gathering more evidence. I kept talking to the lawyer, making sure I knew my rights and what steps I could take to protect myself. I also started documenting her behavior, every lie, every sneaky move, because I knew she'd try to spin things her way if she had the chance. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. Meanwhile was furious. She kept calling, texting, even showing up at my new place, trying to guilt-trip me into reconsidering or working things out. She'd cry and scream, accusing me of ruining everything, calling me jealous, paranoid, and crazy. Honestly, I was sick of her acting like I was the problem. I knew the truth now, and I wasn't going to back down. I told her to stop contacting me unless it was about the legal stuff, and she finally backed off, at least for a little while. One afternoon, I sat down with the lawyer again. We discussed the house sale, the money, and what I could expect if I filed for divorce. Turns out because she never contributed financially, no mortgage payments, no renovations, nothing, she had no legal claim to half the proceeds of the sale. That was a relief, but I knew she'd try to challenge it. She was sneaky enough to say she deserved it all, even if she hadn't earned it. I also found out she'd been trying to hide some of the money she got from the sale, depositing it into secret accounts. That was the last straw. I realized I had to act fast before she tried to run or hide everything. I decided I'd file for divorce. I couldn't keep living with her lying and cheating. I knew it would be messy, but I was done pretending everything was okay. I drafted the paperwork, and when I finally served her the papers, her reaction was priceless. She flipped out, screaming, calling me a terrible husband, insecure and possessive. She accused me of trying to ruin her life, but I knew the truth. I wasn't the one who betrayed our vows, she was. That night, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Part of me still loved her, but I couldn't ignore what she'd done. I'd been naive, trusting her completely, and she betrayed me in the worst way possible. I kept thinking about the house, the money, the lies, and how she'd manipulated everything to her advantage. I also realized I'd grown stronger through all this, more cautious, more aware. I understood now that sometimes you have to fight hard to protect yourself from the people you once trusted. Looking back, I can't help but think about how much I lost, my peace, my trust, the future I thought we had. But I also gained clarity. I learned that some people are just selfish and manipulative, and that you can't fix someone like that. You have to walk away, protect yourself, and move on. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Because if you don't, some people will take everything you have, including your dignity, without remorse. I know it's going to be a long road ahead, but I'm ready. I'm done being her fool. I'm taking back my life piece by piece. And honestly, I don't regret a thing. The whole ordeal has left me pretty battered, honestly. I never thought I'd be the guy standing here telling a story like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs, and sometimes you just have to face the truth head on. Looking back, I realize I was blind for a long time, trusting someone who was only out for herself. Betrayal was a wake-up call, about trust, about money, about recognizing the signs before it's too late. I lost a lot: my marriage, my sense of security, but I also gained clarity. I learned that people can be incredibly selfish, and sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to cut ties and move on. Now I'm rebuilding. I've started focusing on myself, on my career, and on healing from the emotional wreckage she left behind. The house sale, the lies, the affair, all of it has made me realize the importance of honesty and respect in any relationship. I've learned not to ignore the red flags, no matter how small they seem at first. And I've come to understand that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs of betrayal or manipulation, no matter how much you want to believe in the best in someone. Document everything. Get legal advice. Protect your assets. Because in the end, your peace of mind and dignity matter more than any relationship that's built on lies. I may have lost my wife, but I've gained a new perspective. And honestly, that's worth more than anything money can buy. Life goes on, and I know I'll be okay. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about moving forward, learning from the pain, and making sure I never let someone hurt me like this again. I hope anyone out there facing betrayal finds the strength to stand up and fight for themselves, because you're worth it.